Frown upside down.
Frown upside down.
We're going live.
Oh, I think you.
Hey, hola.
Hey, today we're going to talk about why it's so hard to accept advice. We're going to ask about that. Hopefully you have some answers for us. Before we get there, don't forget tomorrow is Fall Share 2019.
Yes,
We need your
it
help.
is. We do need your help. You can give now, 800-600-9624. You can call or text the word share. And thank you for those who have been given and give every month.
Yeah, and with that, let's talk about this issue today because we found an interesting piece online that is worth starting a discussion about, but really I think there's something underneath it. And it's this article that indicates that it's really ineffective, according to research, to ask someone for feedback. Generally, when you ask for feedback, people are like, good job.
Yeah.
Like they don't really give you anything of value, so you need to be more specific and say, I need your advice. And then people, for some reason, feel
And
psychologically
people love,
freed.
Yeah, and they love giving advice.
Oh man, people love giving advice. And so that reminded me of something our friend Lisa Anderson, who sometimes joins us here in Overtime with Focus on the Family and the Boundless Show, she said a couple weeks ago, she wrote this in her latest article called, I want honest feedback, but not really. She said, a few weeks ago, a friend was venting to me about a difficult decision she had to make. She asked me to pray for her, so I did. But I also weighed in on what she said. I wasn't weird or mean about it. On the one hand, I totally felt for her. Her situation was a tough one with no easy solution, and I said as much. But I also gave her a couple of things to think about. She gave her some advice, right? It quickly became apparent that she wasn't interested at all, in my opinion. She had already made up her mind. She was going to do what she wanted to do and was asking God, or maybe me, to just give her a stamp of approval on her decision. When I didn't, she brushed me off and changed the subject. She said, whether it's in relationships, on the job, at church, whatever, it's considered mature and forward-thinking to ask for feedback or advice. Experts say we're supposed to ask for it frequently, proactively, boldly, she said, but I have no idea who's actually doing it because it sure isn't me or my friends. Because we don't want advice.
Yeah.
So why is it so hard for us to accept advice? Love to hear what you guys think about this as we jump on here. We're going to say our good mornings, too, to a lot of people.
Good morning. I'm sure Myrna is on. You think she's on time?
Oh, here we go.
Myrna and Callie.
Hey, what's up? Adrian's back. Good to see you, Adrian. Mike is back.
What am I doing? Yvonne. Good morning, Yvonne.
Oh, and Eva's back. Missed us. Hey, Eva, we missed you, too. Glad to have you back. So why is it so hard to accept advice? Janelle, are you really good at this? Are you good at accepting advice?
I used to not be good at it, and it was a lot because of what one of the listeners texted in, and she said that she struggles with it because of insecurity. I didn't think it was insecurity at the time, but it's this idea, it's this thing that I gotta have it together. An example is motherhood. You know, like I would feel crushed when people would give me advice because as a new mom, I would think, no, like I know what I'm doing, you know, and then nothing like parenting to humble you. So years into motherhood, I'm like, please, all the advice, I'm a mess, and it brings a relief and it just takes a lot of pressure off to admit, you know, to get to the point where you're like, yeah, I can use help. You know, and I use motherhood, but in other areas too, I struggled a lot. And I'd say insecurity, but the real deal is it's pride.
Yeah, and someone just said that. Totally true. As Deborah said, it's pride issues. Yeah, we all have those. But I think one of the issues why it's so hard to receive advice is almost a formulaic one, as in how we approach it. Because here's how I typically will do this, right? I have a problem or an issue that needs to be resolved. I think through the options, I come up with my idea what I should do, and then I go around to confirm whether or not that is a good idea.
Yes.
Okay?
Yes.
And so when I do that, I am quick to get defensive.
Yeah.
But if you're asking for advice, wouldn't you honestly have to kind of open-handedly say, well, I've got a few ideas, but I genuinely don't know which is best, and I'd love you to tell me which is best.
Yeah.
We don't do that.
Yeah.
We want people to confirm
Validate.
and validate that our idea on what to do is good.
Christy agrees with you, and she says, deep down, we're looking for validation. Unless you are truly transparent and open to growth and being stretched with accountability of your decisions, agreement and validation is the only thing sought out.
Yeah.
Yeah, good morning, Christy. It's just scary because we talk about, oh, I want to do it this way. What do you think? The ones that scare me is like, let's take marriage. Like to ask someone, yo, let me know really like, this is going on between my husband and me. What's really the issue? Because right, that's what you're thinking. But it's scary when somebody, and this, I have a couple of friends who will straight do this. When they tell, like when you just know in your head, like what is wrong with my husband? And then the person tells you, do you realize like the problem is you and your perspective or your, that's the ones that I find. Because those other ones are more distant. Like, oh, I want to do things this way. What do you think? Even though I've been there, whether with homeschooling or motherhood. But the ones that's about you, and it could be marriage, it could be friendship. Let's say there's an issue, I've had issues with friends, and when you realize, like, no, you're the one wrong. Like, those are scary.
But see, I mean,
they hurt.
we would have to agree, though, right, that Christians are people who seek advice.
Yeah.
From fellow believers. You don't want to be unequally yoked. I mean,
Right.
The scriptures make that clear. Matthew 18, if someone sins against you, you go to them and you talk about it.
Yeah.
You don't gossip behind their back. And over again, there's connectivity in scripture between wisdom and humility. So we've got to be humble. It's part of, being a believer. And so all that being the case, we should want this and be good at it. But it can hurt.
It can hurt. I like what Eva says. It could be the person giving advice. They may not have the same morals or beliefs as me.
Yeah.
I also think the way certain people give advice, for those people that kind of go where they need to go and don't tickle my ear, like Rod said, they come from a position of like love and compassion. I think the way you deliver the advice makes it more hurtful.
Well, yeah. Well, and
even if you're right, it's just like.
That's exactly. I was going to say that too.
Yeah.
It's the idea that maybe one of the reasons it's not easy for us to accept advice is because so many people are terrible at giving it.
Yeah. Oh, terrible.
Like, since you asked, I'm going to tell you.
Oh, yeah.
Like, there has to be a way where you can give advice in a way that builds people up, not tears them down.
Yeah.
But often people see it as a window to just tell you what they really think, to just kind of stab you and hurt you.
Yeah. Tamar says it's hard to accept advice because once you get it, you can't fake ignorance anymore. You're on the spot to make a change.
Oh, Tamar. Yeah, that is why we don't want to ask for advice, right? Because what if they say what we know to be true, then we can be held accountable for it.
Yeah.
They can be like, look, I told you.
Yeah.
Here's what God's word says. You know what it says. You don't want to listen to it. And you can no longer fake ignorance. Wow, good point.
Yvonne, good morning. She says, I have been told I know how to give advice but not receive. Sometimes people use control to give advice, so it's hard to receive it.
Yeah.
Adrian, for me, I had a need to always be right, so advice was not welcome. That was me, Adrian. But after giving God access to that area of my heart and reasoning, I learned it was really pride, and now I can receive advice and constructive criticism. Yeah, my 20s, I was just like that, early 30s. But
40s,
I
50s.
slowly realized, yo, I don't have to know everything. It's okay to say, oh man, I got that wrong. It's okay. And I had a fear of, but then you look around and you realize, we all getting stuff wrong. That was so released. It just helped me. What about you? I'm over here saying I struggle
No, I'm
with
enjoying
it.
that, actually. I'm having a great time with that.
Did you
What other
ever
brothers
struggle
do?
with that?
Oh, sure. No, it's always
Was
a
there a
struggle.
period? Did you? I mean, I still struggle. I'm just saying there was in that season I was bad. Was there a season where you struggled more, or does it depend on the area of your life?
I think there is something to say about with age and maturity comes wisdom. Because the longer you live, I think the more you realize how much you don't know.
Hello,
Which
yeah.
makes you more humble. So I think time / maturity. I'm mature in some areas, very immature in others.
Yeah.
has made it, like you, I think, easier to accept it, but there's still times when I really don't want advice because I know what they're going to say and it's going to hurt. Or
Yeah.
there are, like, I have a hard time accepting with humility advice from someone who has no clue what they're talking about.
Yes. And can you kind of explain that a
Let's
little
be
bit? 'Cause
honest,
I
just
have-
because someone gives you advice doesn't mean they're right. Just because someone gives you advice doesn't mean you have to take it.
Right.
I think we're required to be loving and joyful and patient and kind to people, no matter what their advice and the value of it. But isn't it hard when someone gives you just terrible advice to not just go, "What is wrong with you?
Yeah.
I am not going to do that, you crazy person." Now you just destroyed a relationship.
Yeah. One thing is like when people say, this is where I thought you were going. You know when your kid's tripping and they're like on the floor in a tantrum, or we have older kids, they're just acting a mess, and people come and say, you know how you handle that, right? Instead of trying to find out, they don't know your kid, they don't know how the day was, they don't know the season you're going through. You know, the people that take the time to find out where you're at, what's going on, how are you doing? It's kind of like we've said before, you earn your way into saying, you know how I would handle it. Now you know the situation. Now I can receive what you just said.
Yeah, so there's two sides of why it's so hard for us to accept advice. And some of it's our responsibility, and some of
Yeah.
it's the other person. Like,
Yeah.
if we ask the wrong person, shame on us. You know, we ask someone with no experience or wisdom. We ask someone who we think is probably going to just tell us what we want to hear. That's our fault. But we also, we also need to swallow our pride and our humility and be able to kind of go, wow, I'm always able to learn, and I need to learn and grow in my wisdom in the Lord.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
what do you guys think? I almost gave the phone number like you're going to call us or something. But no.
Eva says, tailor who my advice comes from because I do want it from someone who would be eager to sabotage. I don't want it from someone who would be eager to sabotage my situation. I want it from someone I love and respect because they know me well enough to tell me when I'm right and when I'm dead wrong. Can I say though, I know of situations where you can get actually good advice, even in the wrong way, from the wrong person. You know?
Okay, because I was going to say, doesn't someone have to earn the right to give you to give you good advice? And if you ask the wrong person, shame on you.
Yeah.
But you're saying that sometimes we can get good advice from people who have no right to give it.
And it could be the wrong person. They may have the wrong motives. I've seen it happen, you know? Like it could even be, and we say enemy, but it could be, we see it in relationships. You know, let's say you got issues with an in-law or whatever. They could say stuff that stings, and it could be too sting. And weeks later, you can actually look back and be like, oh man, maybe that is something. Like maybe I do have an issue with that. And I think our pride and our issue, and maybe we're right to say, you don't have a right to give me advice, blocks our objectivity to say, man, maybe there is something in what this person said.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I just don't want to be so quick to say, no, I only take advice from these people.
Because there are times when I think one of the reasons we hesitate to ask for advice and we don't want it is because we've been hurt before by advice.
Mm-hmm.
I actually have a situation early in my career in radio.
Mm-hmm.
I had left teaching, I was insecure. I had finally had my first opportunity on like an obscure day to fill in hosting.
Yeah.
And afterwards there was this guy on the team who had tons of experience. And this is not here,
Yeah.
so don't worry about where it is.
Yeah.
I've worked in a couple different cities. That had a ton of experience and a lot of wisdom. And I thought I ought to go to him. And so I did. I knocked on his door, went to his office, sat down and said, hey, I really respect all the experience you have in the business. You heard the show today. I'd love to get your feedback and your advice on how I can improve and what I can do better. He goes, well, here's my advice for you. Find a new industry. Because you don't belong on the radio.
Wow.
That hurt.
Yeah.
And he was wrong.
Yeah.
I mean, I needed help. I needed to improve. I wasn't ready for prime time or anything at the moment, but wow, that hurt. And so now suddenly what that's done is done damage to my trust in that I'm not necessarily willing to risk getting advice
Oh yeah.
because somebody hurt me so much with it.
And you asked. Oh.
And I tried to be humble. I tried to be biblical and smart.
Yeah.
So how do we overcome that then? I
How
should
do
have
we overcome bad advice?
hurtful advice, damaging advice. That's one of the reasons we don't ask for it.
Teresa says, Brian, you are great on the radio. Kat says he
Thank
was
you.
threatened by you.
Oh, that's very nice of you to say that. I don't really think he was if you knew him. It's very kind of you to say that. I wasn't looking for that, for the record, but I'm grateful that you said so. But you see, like, I shouldn't let it hurt me. But it hurt me, and it caused me to be less willing to seek advice.
Yeah.
Although also, in turn, it's caused me to be much more eager to find really helpful advice.
Yeah.
And seek out people who are willing to speak helpful truth into me and build
and
me
you
up.
do open yourself up to that. Like,
Yeah.
you know, so you got to be strong enough to know, okay, that's not for me.
Yeah. Or it's bad, or it's mean-spirited, or whatever, right?
Yeah. Mike says, or Kat says, maybe you heard that hurtful advice so you can be a better person to someone else and not be like him.
No, and see, that's a good example, Kat, I think, of how God works all things together for the good of those who love Him and are called according to His purposes. You know, like I have to view that less as, ouch, I got hurt, and more as, what can I learn from this? And I certainly vowed at that moment to never be that guy.
Yeah.
You'd be surprised behind the scenes in media how people can treat each other.
Yeah.
I've heard some crazy stories in secular and Christian radio, and I was determined in that moment to not become that. Hopefully, I haven't.
No, not at all. Aretha says, I've been there, done that though. When we say consider the source, it's tough when the source is supposed to be knowledgeable.
That's it, isn't it? Like, there's times when somebody who's got the knowledge and the experience and the respect can rip you to 1,000 pieces, shatter you with their advice, their mean-spirited bad advice. So that's probably why we're bad at, why we don't want it.
Yeah.
And why it's so hard to accept.
Yeah.
Because it's so rare to find the good advice with the right motives and the right approach.
Right. Right.
So is the answer we just be careful about who we ask advice from?
I do think, we do need to be careful, but then you got to deal with all the unsolicited advice. Someone just said, most people don't give advice. Aretha says, most of the times it's not advice, but more of an opinion. My family loves to give their opinion rather than advice, especially if they haven't asked them.
Yeah.
But what's the difference? Isn't all advice opinion? All advice is opinion.
Yes, but there is like a difference between unsubstantiated, uneducated opinion versus well-researched through life experience, education. Like, that kind of opinion, I think, enters the realm of advice. But like, I'm not going to go get advice about being a parent from someone who's never had a kid.
Yeah, but even let's say...
but they could do a lot of research on it.
Yeah. Even let's say what that guy told you. There's a story, remember someone told Oprah, don't, just quit, you don't have a face for TV.
Yeah, she started in weather, didn't she?
Can you imagine if she would have heard them, number one? Number two, there are times where people need to hear that. Forget the you don't have a face for TV, but man, you're not great at this. Your gifting is somewhere else. You can actually help someone.
Mm-hmm.
But it's all advice. How do you separate it? Do you always want to say, no, don't tell that to people? Because somebody shared and said, the problem is when you get all of this advice on the topic, and some of them contradict each other and kind of picking, and you don't know what to do. That's an area where we're thinking, oh, that's so mean. But there have been times you can rescue a young person by helping them identify, maybe this isn't your thing. Let's find what you're good at.
Yeah, it's true.
Or a young person or anybody. So what have you done in terms of, what do you do, I forgot who texted it in terms of when advice you get contradicts each other and knowing what to do with conflicting advice.
I think sometimes if I've gone to a good source, if I've gone to somebody who has credibility, who loves the Lord, and both of them are giving me opposite advice, I think in that moment, God's giving me a choice. Like, if I can test the advice against the scriptures and say that they both are making a valid point, At some point, God's giving me a choice, and I have to just choose.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Some great things coming
Yeah.
in. I really appreciate what you guys are saying here. I want to get
Hi,
better at this
Mike.
because I think it's part of the Christian journey, is being better at not only giving but receiving advice. And for me, it's become a lesson in finding that, for lack of a better term from the movies, that circle of trust,
Yeah.
where you've got a couple of people who've earned it relationally. They've earned the right relationally to say hard things and true things. They're truth speakers, but they know how to encourage you. They care about you. They love the Lord. They're devoted followers of Jesus. The people who fit in that category, that's who you want to go to for advice. The advice you really want to chew on with significant measure. Otherwise, grain of salt is what you have to do, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Kat says exactly, God sometimes lets things happen and shatters us, but you will never do that to anyone else. In fact, you would probably go that extra mile to help someone else because of that situation. Just look at this live meeting. Y'all are doing this. Is so helpful for everyone, including yourself. Just think he could have said that to someone not strong enough, that's the truth, or depressed, and they could have maybe ended their life, or I was thinking she was also gonna say ending their career. Like, you could have somebody just walk away because of bad advice.
Yeah. Well, Kat, I really appreciate you saying that. It's true, but that is where hindsight paired with faith in Jesus really becomes helpful, because we can say, okay, God, I trust that you have worked this together for good, and you're going to work this together for good. Show me how. We may not ever see the answer to that, but you're right. I think that we can see that if we truly take a minute and look at it.
Yeah.
And I think Aretha's right too, where we can't forget to test it against the scriptures. Now, we're not always going to get a clear answer, but when someone gives us advice, whether we follow it should be dependent upon whether it's consistent with the core of the scriptures, which ultimately is the gospel.
Yeah, and not everything, like he said, is in scripture. For example, should I take this career? Should I stay at this job? What I've done in the past is ask and pray for confirmation.
Yeah.
You know, if someone, let's say, tells me this isn't what God wants for you in terms of a job, you know, you're not going to find that in like James. You know, so in terms of being prayerful, I think God doesn't, I learned that early on, and I love that about him, that he doesn't mind confirming. And he would have to, like, many times throughout the years, confirm something for me. And I love that he's not irritated. He's not like, I told you already. You know, so just feeling free to say, God, can you confirm this? Like, is this really what you want for me? Instead of just going with the first one. Because Mommy did give me great advice years ago. And she was like, you don't have to take 100% of everyone's advice or opinions. You know, she said, listen to what people say. You pick and choose what you think is for you. And then let go of everything else.
Moms have a lot of wisdom.
Yeah, they do.
And with that, we got to get out of here, family. Tomorrow's share. Don't forget, share. We need your help financially. 800-600-9624 or moodyradio.org/Cleveland. We're not going to be doing our regular overtime during share.
No.
We may pop in with a surprise here or there, so stay connected to the Facebook page here. But with share, running, we're going to still be on the air
Yeah, we
at this
are.
time. So just be sure to listen to that, and we'd be grateful for your support if you can give it, and keep this conversation rolling here.
Hasta luego.
See you later. Right? Hasta.
Hasta la pasta.
Give me some egos. I'm really struggling to stop this.